Some nights begin like any other. The weather is normal. The streets are quiet. The rooms are lit the same way they always are. People go to work, go to school, go to sleep, and assume the world will keep following the usual rhythm. But every once in a while, something interrupts that rhythm. A phone call comes in at the wrong time. A message appears before anyone should be awake. A voice on the other end of the line says something that makes your stomach drop. And suddenly the night is not ordinary anymore. Tonight, I want to share 3 true lockdown horror stories. These are not about monsters, ghosts, or anything impossible. They are the kind of stories that become terrifying precisely because they feel believable. They take place in real places. Schools, hotels, public buildings, hallways with fluorescent lights. Parking lots with too much empty space. Rooms where people thought they were safe until they realized they might not be. The most unsettling part of a lockdown is not always the danger itself. It is the waiting. It is not knowing what is outside the door. It is hearing footsteps in the hallway and wondering whether they are running toward you or away from you. It is trying to stay quiet when every instinct in your body is telling you to move. So settle in. Turn the lights down if you want. And whatever you do, do not mistake silence for safety. Story 1, the basement hallway. The first story begins in a school that looked completely ordinary from the outside. It was a large public high school in a quiet suburb, the kind of place that had 2 crowded parking lots, a football field behind the gym, and a front office that always smelled faintly like coffee and copier ink. Students complained about the building all the time. The hallways were too long. The vending machines never worked. The basement classrooms were old and too cold in the winter. And the basement bathrooms were the kind nobody wanted to use unless they absolutely had to. One of the students, Evan, had a habit of avoiding the upstairs lunch rush whenever he could. He liked the basement because it was quieter. The math classroom down there had only a handful of students, and the teacher was one of those calm, monotone people who could explain a lesson without raising her voice once. Evan usually sat near the back with his friend Malik. They were the kind of friends who did not need to talk constantly to enjoy each other's company. A glance across a desk was enough to communicate a joke, a complaint, or the shared understanding that school could be boring in exactly the same way every day. On the morning this happened, nothing felt unusual at first. First period ended, second period ended. By late morning, the school had settled into its usual rhythm, with the muffled sound of lockers slamming and sneakers squeaking on polished floors. Evan and Malik were in the basement hallway just before lunch. They had both been talking about skipping the next class for a few minutes, just to walk to the restroom and clear their heads before the cafeteria got crowded. They were not planning anything dramatic. They were just 2 bored students trying to steal a few minutes of peace from a school day that felt endless. They were standing near the basement restrooms when Evan's phone buzzed. He pulled it out without thinking, expecting a text from his mother or maybe a group chat notification. Instead, it was a message from another student. "Lockdown, go to the nearest room, now." Evan read it once, then twice. He looked up at Malik, who had already seen the same message on his own phone. "What does that mean?" Malik asked, but both of them already knew. A lockdown message did not need explanation. It meant stay where you are. It meant do not open the door. It meant do not look outside unless you want to see something that will stay in your head for years. They looked down the hallway. It was empty, but in a strange way that felt wrong. The basement always had a little echo, a low hum from the vents, a distant sound from pipes or machinery, but now those normal noises seemed too loud in the silence. Evan could hear his own breathing. "What do we do?" Malik whispered. Evan pointed to the nearest restroom. "Inside now." They rushed in, pushing the door shut behind them. There were 2 stalls, a row of sinks, and a hand dryer that always sounded like it was about to explode. They locked themselves inside the largest stall and stood on top of the toilet seat so no one could see their feet beneath the stall door. For a few seconds, there was nothing. Then they heard footsteps in the hallway, slow footsteps, not running, not panicked, just steady enough to be sure someone was out there. Evan held his breath. The footsteps stopped directly outside the bathroom. A second later, the handle turned. It did not open because the door was locked. Then the handle turned again, a pause. And then the sound of someone breathing on the other side. Not loud breathing, just enough to know that whoever was there had stopped and was listening. Malik squeezed Evan's arm so hard it hurt. The bathroom door creaked open a few inches. Both of them stared through the crack below the stall door, watching the thin band of light from the hallway widen and narrow. Then a shadow appeared. A man's shadow, tall enough to block half the doorway. Evan's entire body went cold. The man did not speak, he did not knock, he did not do anything at first except stand there. Then he took one step into the bathroom, and another. Evan remembered every tiny detail in a way that only fear can make possible. The smell of the disinfectant, the humming light above the sinks. The way Malik's hand shook, the sound of a zipper as the man shifted his jacket. Evan had never been so aware of a room in his life. The man moved slowly toward the stalls. When he reached the first one, he kicked the door lightly, as if checking whether someone was inside. Then he moved to the second. Evan was already sweating through his shirt. The man stopped in front of their stall. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then came a soft tap on the stall door, not hard enough to break it, not even close. Just enough to let them know he was there. A voice followed, low, flat, almost calm. "Open the door." Neither of them moved. The silence became unbearable. The man tapped again, this time a little harder. "Open the door." Evan's mind raced. He had no weapon, no plan, no idea whether the man outside was armed. All he knew was that the school had gone into lockdown, and this person was definitely not supposed to be in that bathroom. The man grabbed the stall handle and jiggled it. Then from somewhere farther away in the building came the faint but unmistakable sound of a siren. The man in the bathroom froze. For the first time, he seemed uncertain. He turned sharply toward the hallway. Then he walked out, his footsteps moving faster now. Evan and Malik stayed in that stall for what felt like an hour, though it was probably less than 10 minutes. When they finally heard voices outside, the voices were loud and urgent. "Police, stay where you are." Evan nearly collapsed with relief. A teacher opened the bathroom door, and the first thing she saw was two terrified students standing on the toilet seat of a restroom stall like they had forgotten how to be human. The lockdown lasted the rest of the morning. Later, there would be police reports, questions, security footage, and official statements that were careful with every word. They would say a suspicious adult had entered the school through a back access area that had been left unsecured. They would say he had been seen near the basement hallways. They would say the school responded quickly and that no students were hurt. But what stayed with Evan was not the report. It was that calm voice outside the stall door. "Open the door." Even years later, he could still hear it exactly as it sounded that morning. Story 2, the hotel alarm. The second story happened at a hotel that catered mostly to business travelers and families passing through town on long road trips. It was one of those places that looked clean and forgettable from the outside. Beige walls, bright lobby lights, plastic key cards, a small breakfast area that smelled like waffles and burnt coffee. The narrator of this story was a man named Daniel, a graduate student who had been attending a conference in a nearby city. He had checked in late, eaten takeout in his room, and planned to spend the rest of the evening catching up on notes for the next day's presentation. The hotel room was on the 5th floor, near the back of the building. It was just after midnight when the alarm system suddenly began to sound, not a fire alarm. Not the kind of high, piercing noise that sends everyone sprinting for the stairs. This alarm was different. It came through the room's intercom speaker as a calm, automated voice. "Attention. A security lockdown is in effect. Please remain in your room. Do not open your door unless instructed by hotel staff or emergency personnel." Daniel sat up immediately. At first, he thought it had to be a drill, maybe a technical test, maybe some kind of system malfunction. Then the message repeated. "Attention. A security lockdown is in effect." This time the tone felt more serious. Daniel got out of bed and looked through the peephole. The hallway outside was dim, lit only by emergency lighting. Every few seconds, he could hear distant footsteps and the muffled sound of doors being checked. His first instinct was to look at his phone and search for news alerts, but there was no signal strong enough to load anything quickly. He tried calling the front desk. No answer. Then another voice came from the intercom. "Please remain in your room. Do not answer the door for anyone except law enforcement." That changed everything. Daniel walked over to the bed and quietly moved the chair beneath the door handle. not because he thought it would stop anything serious, but because it made him feel a little less helpless. He shut off the main light and stood near the window, looking down at the parking lot. From that height, everything looked strangely peaceful. Cars sat in neat rows. A vending machine glowed near the side entrance. Somewhere below, a person walked quickly across the lot with their head down, as if they were trying not to be seen. He waited. Several minutes passed. Then a knock came at his door, 3 soft taps. Daniel stopped breathing. A voice followed. "Hotel maintenance?" He did not move. Another knock. "Sir, we need to check your room." Something about the voice sounded rehearsed, not quite natural, too smooth, too direct. Daniel's eyes shifted to the door chain, then to the chair, then back to the peephole. "Who is it?" he called out, keeping his voice steady. No answer. Then the intercom crackled again. "Do not open the door." Daniel stepped back. A minute later, he heard 2 heavier knocks from farther down the hall, followed by a voice that was much clearer and louder. "Police." "Open the door and identify yourself." The difference in tone was immediate, sharp, confident, real. Daniel moved to the door but did not open it. Instead, he spoke through the wood. "I'm in room 512. Stay inside," the officer said. "We are moving room to room." Daniel heard footsteps stop outside another room nearby. A door opened. A woman's voice answered, then another door. The pattern continued. He stood there listening, trying to understand what was happening. The hallway sounded active but contained, controlled. Eventually, someone knocked again, this time with a clear announcement from outside. "Police department, you can look through the peephole." Daniel did. 2 officers stood in the hall, 1 male and 1 female, both wearing tactical vests and holding flashlights angled down rather than up. It was the kind of detail that made them look real instantly. Behind them, the hallway remained tense and dim. "Were you asked to leave your room?" the officer asked. "Yes," Daniel replied. "Someone said maintenance?" The female officer exchanged a glance with the other officer, then asked him to stay behind the door while they continued checking the floor. He later learned that a suspicious person had been seen entering the building through a side entrance, and that staff had triggered the lockdown protocol. The officers were trying to locate the person before he reached the guest floors. The reason Daniel remembered this story so vividly was not because anything directly happened in his room. It was because of the waiting, the sense of being trapped in a small space while the world outside was suddenly full of unknown movement. Later, after the lockdown ended, he would see guests gathering in the lobby with their shoes on, holding coffee cups, speaking in low voices. Some were annoyed, some were confused. But almost everyone had the same look in their eyes. The look of people who had just realized how quickly a normal night can turn into something else. Daniel left the hotel the next morning, but the memory of that voice through the intercom stayed with him. "Do not open the door." He never forgot how much fear could be carried in such a simple instruction. Story 3, The Officer at the Locker Room. The third story is the one that feels the most like a nightmare from the inside, because it is told from the perspective of the person who has to move toward the danger instead of away from it. The narrator in this story was a school resource officer named Grant. He had worked at several schools before this one, and by the time he took this assignment, he knew the routine well. Most days were uneventful. He checked doors, chatted with students, answered small problems, and made sure nothing got out of hand. That morning started with a call from the front office. A parent had reported seeing a suspicious white van parked near the back of the school. The van had been there long enough to draw attention. Then a second call came in from a teacher. A person was seen near the side entrance by the gym. The school went into lockdown within minutes. Grant was told to check the south wing and make his way toward the boys' locker room because that was the last place the suspicious person had been seen. He took his flashlight and radio and moved through the dim hallway with the school now strangely silent around him. The lockdown had shut everything down. No announcements, no students in the hall. No chatter, no footsteps, just the soft squeak of his shoes against the floor and the static noise from his radio. The van was still outside when he looked through the window near the back entrance, but the driver's side was empty. The engine was off. The doors were closed. He relayed that information over the radio and was told backup was on the way. Then he entered the locker room area. It was colder there, probably because of the ventilation, and darker because the emergency lights in that section were weaker than the ones in the main hallway. Rows of metal lockers stretched along both sides of the room. The air had that closed-in smell of rubber mats, deodorant, and old sweat that every school locker room seems to have. Grant called out loudly that he was law enforcement and asked anyone inside to respond. No answer. He moved slowly between the rows, scanning the doors. Then he heard it. A small noise, not footsteps. Not a voice, a faint metallic sound like something moving inside one of the lockers farther down the row. He stopped and listened. Nothing. Then again, a scratch. He shifted his light toward the sound and noticed one locker door not fully flush with the others. It was shut, but not firmly. Not enough for anyone to see inside, just enough to suggest it had been disturbed recently. Grant called out again. No answer. He reached for the handle. That was when the noise came again, louder this time. Not from the locker in front of him, from the next room over. The football locker room. Grant turned sharply and moved toward it. The door was cracked open. He pushed it wider and swept the flashlight inside. At first, he saw only benches, hanging gear, and the pale shine of metal lockers. Then he heard a muffled sound, a voice. Very quiet. Help, Grant froze. Hello, he called. The voice came again, more desperate this time. Please. He moved toward the sound and found that one of the lockers was locked from the outside, but giving slightly from within. He put his shoulder against it and pulled. The metal door opened enough for him to see a boy curled inside, pale-faced and shaking, his breathing fast and shallow. For a second, Grant could not understand what he was looking at. Then the boy spoke again. He had been hiding there when the lockdown started. He had seen someone in the hall. He panicked and crawled into the locker to stay hidden, but the person outside had begun checking doors and had pushed the locker shut tighter than he could open from inside. The boy had been trapped in the dark for what felt like forever. Grant got him out and called for medical assistance. The boy was shaken but not seriously hurt. The situation had been frightening, but it ended with relief instead of tragedy, which made it easier to tell later and much harder to forget. As for the suspicious van outside, it was gone by the time officers checked the lot. No one ever clearly identified the person who had been near the school that morning. That part lingered in Grant's mind for a long time, because it meant the person had been close enough to cause the lockdown, close enough to enter the building, and close enough to disappear before anyone could confirm who he was. Grant later said that the worst part was not finding the boy in the locker. It was realizing that whatever had been in the school that morning had never fully been accounted for. And when a situation ends without a clean answer, people keep asking the same question long after the danger is gone. Who was there? And what would have happened if they had arrived 5 minutes later? That is why lockdown stories stay with people. They are not loud in the way movie scenes are loud. They are quiet. They are locked doors, blank hallways, voices outside windows, intercom messages that sound calm only because they are trying not to panic you. And that is exactly what makes them so hard to forget. If you have ever been in a lockdown, even a brief one, you probably know the feeling. The strange combination of fear, boredom, and waiting. The way every small sound becomes important. The way normal time seems to stop working. These stories are unsettling because they remind us that safety is often thinner than we think. Sometimes it takes only one wrong person in one wrong place at one wrong time, and suddenly the building you knew yesterday feels completely different. If you listened all the way through, thank you for being here. Subscribe for more true scary stories, real-life horror, and unsettling situations that feel too close to reality. And if you have our own lockdown story, share it in the comments. Because sometimes the stories people are most afraid to tell are the ones everyone remembers the longest.